And we
You
used
had a
to
lot of
get.
jobs, huh, Daddy? When did you start working when you were young?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of jobs. I was trying to think when I first started. I had to be 10 or 11, and I sold hamburgers on the docks when, especially during the deer season and things like that, holidays. They'd line up for 5-6 miles to get on the boat to go across to Mackinac City.
Oh, okay.
And I would sell hamburgers. I'd sell them for 15 cents a hamburger. I got to keep a nickel, and 10 cents went to the
Burger place?
one burger place.
Oh, that's
Who
pretty
made
good.
who made the hamburgers?
I was
What
an
happened?
aunt.
You want this pillow yet, then?
A job he had.
It was an aunt of my aunt. It was her sister that would had the place. She ran it, and then I would hawk papers on the dock. We do a lot of fishing off the docks. We would fish for perch. And I remember more than once I'd catch a string of perch and I'd sell it before I got home.
Yellow perch?
Just walking down the street, and somebody would drive up and offer me a couple bucks for a string of perch, so I'd sell it to them.
I was up in St. Agnes.
Yeah, I was up in St. Agnes off the docks. And then I would carry baggage onto the boats. And then Howard and David and I would sneak on the boat. We'd go down the engine room because we knew the engineer. And we'd stay down there until the purser had gone by collecting for tickets. And then we'd go up on deck. And then we'd go over to the island, and we'd caddy on the golf course, carry baggage off the boat that we had. One thing we always did when we went to Mackinac Island was we go to a little nut shop and buy a bag of cashews, bits and pieces, and that's what we eat all day. We'd get a big bag for 75 cents. Get all in that you wanted. And we'd do that all day, and then we'd sneak on the boat the last trip at night and go back home.
And did you ever get caught sneaking on the boat?
We probably did, but he never said anything. He usually let us go. So he'd say nothing. We'd go over to the old fort. We'd spend some time at the fort on Mackinac Island, spend that. And then I worked at a bowling alley setting pins. It was a little 4-lane bowling alley up above a restaurant.
Above a restaurant?
Yeah, above a restaurant.
Bowling alley above a restaurant.
Bowling alley above a restaurant.
They put them up on second floors and stuff.
Yeah, and it was a little 4-lane, and we would set pins, and I get a nickel a line. David and Howard and I and somebody else would be usually setting pins. I remember one night in particular, I still remember this. We were setting pins, and David had somebody was bowling in his alley. He was next to me, and it was a guy who didn't pay any attention to when the guy was down there picking up pins.
Oh, yeah?
And this one time, David was down picking up pins, and he bowled. And here's this ball coming at him, so I reached over and I put the rack down, and the ball hit the rack, and the boss came out and found out what happened, and he kicked the guy out. But if I hadn't put the rack down, that ball could have hit David, and he really threw that ball, real fast. I remember another time where the guy was bowling. He bowled so hard he hit the pins, and one of the pins hit the back wall and busted him right in half.
Wow.
Wow. So the pin right in half?
Yeah, busted the pin right in half.
Oh.
So they were pretty rough. Then I worked where my mother was working. She was a waitress. Most of her life she was a waitress or a cook. And she was waitressing at this one restaurant, and they needed a dishwasher. So I was washing dishes. I think I was about 12 then. I was washing dishes for $1 a day. And one incident I can remember very vividly. The guy, the cook, had just finished making pies, and he wanted to take them out in the back to cool off. So he told me, he said, "Now be careful." He said, "Don't drop them." So I take the first pie and I walk out, and I had to go down one step, and I tripped.
Oh, wow.
And I lost the pie.
Oh, my goodness.
The pie went flying. Pie went flying. I don't remember. Pie. But I remember dropping the pie, and it flew all over. But that was when you could buy a steak dinner for $1.50.
Yeah.
You know,
I bet you he wasn't too happy though with you.
no, he wasn't
Did you have to buy that
happy.
pie?
I don't remember. I remember dropping it, but I don't remember what happened after that. I don't remember how long I worked there. It wasn't too long, a couple months maybe.
Did you do ice too?
Huh?
Did you deliver ice or something too?
No, I delivered milk.
Milk.
I used to work in Crosstrew Dairy. Howard, David, and I again.
Did a lot together.
We weren't all working at the same time, but we were working for Crosstrew Dairy. And that was a nice job. It was fun, but there again, you remember vividly certain things. And we used to deliver off of a pickup, and they had all cars in those days had running boards. And then we'd stand on the running board, and then we'd fill our racks with milk for our next delivery to what the people take, you know. And I remember I filled the rack, and then I went to step off, and I made the mistake of stepping the wrong way.
Oh.
You always step off the direction that the car is going. But I stepped off toward the back. And I fell flat on my face, boy. I busted a bottle of milk or something, but it was no big deal, but it's just that I got myself pretty well scratched up.
You never did that.
That's when I learned that you don't ever step off to the back. Because you see, you're moving one way and you're trying to go the other way. And it just doesn't work. So you have to be careful. But that was fun too. We in the morning, some of our first deliveries were to the bakery. And we would get all their culls. They'd have a bag of culls there for us, donuts that didn't turn out right, weren't perfect. They were odd, and they'd give us them, or we'd buy a pie and take a pie, and we'd stop and get a bottle of milk and have a half milk and a pie.
So, Daddy, what year was that?
Huh?
Around what year was that?
That goes back to about 42, 43. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Oh.
That's when the milk bottles had the caps on them that were like a face or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
and the cream was on top,
Yes.
so you could pour off the cream. I know my mother used to make whipped cream off the cream on the top of the thing, and then from there, where did we go? Then I think my mom and dad got separated because my dad was going out on my mother. And so my mother moved back to Marinette. And I didn't do much there until I worked on the railroad when I was 16.
Oh yeah, you were a dancer.
I was a Gandhi dancer.
Yep, you went dancing
I
down
was
the
a
road.
Gandhi dancer. That's a railroad section hand. They don't know what a Gandhi dancer is today. And that, and laying new rail. And then I worked at the Rialto Theater as a doorman
With mommy?
Yeah, couldn't talk.
with Mommy. Yeah, she worked behind the counter, but the gal that was a manager, she wouldn't let us talk because we were going out together. She could talk to anybody else, but she couldn't talk to me while we were working. And we had it was a good job. We had fun doing that.
Well, you got to
And-
see all the shows then.
Yeah, we used to go to the show on the weekend or when I wasn't working, and